I'm back with former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, who's now doing a regular podcast. It's called Lightning Rod. You gotta check it out. Rod, we were talking about, you mentioned at the very end of the last segment, Afghanistan. And I understand that you had someone close to you who was killed in Kabul in Afghanistan. Say a word about that.
He was my publicist. His name was Glenn Selig. He's a wonderful person, a loving father, two young children, a daughter and a son, a great dad, a loving husband, and he went to Afghanistan as part of a group that was there to try to educate some of the locals on democracy, ironically. He was at a hotel in Kabul, and Taliban terrorists came in and started shooting the Westerners, Europeans and Americans, and killing people at will. And my dear friend was killed that way, and the hotel that they were in was eventually firebombed and was burned to the ground. This happened in 2018, and it's just a reminder about how dangerous Afghanistan is. Another reminder that, you know, when you withdraw from a place like that, I do believe the decision to withdraw is right. You have to do it in a way that you're listening to the experts and you're being practical about how you do things. And I think we'll talk about this later, Dinesh, but I would say that as the president, you have to be like Tom Brady as a quarterback. You've got to be able to look at the field, get to the line of scrimmage and see that things have changed, and you've got to be willing to make those adjustments and call an audible, and Biden failed dramatically to do that.
I mean, it seems very clear, even from a statement I played earlier today on the podcast, where Biden basically said, listen, we can get Americans out, but we're now relying on the Taliban to make that happen. I mean, the Taliban clearly controls the airport. They control access to the airport. There have been instructions to Americans not even to go to the airport. I mean, do you find it, it seems beyond tragic that the very same barbarians that you just described storming into a hotel, terrorist, so we now have a terrorist regime, and we, the United States, are now reliant on the goodwill of that regime to get our citizens back home.
That's right. Look, this could be worse. It is worse than the hostage crisis with Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter wasn't responsible for how those hostages were taken. Now the Americans that are stuck there in Afghanistan are very much like hostages, and we'll see what happens with the Taliban. But I would bet very much they're going to use the Americans and the evacuation as a bargaining chip to either require the United States to pay billions of dollars in tribute to them. Keep an eye on that, and I predict Biden will do it behind the scenes without people knowing it, if he can get away with it. Or we're going to be required to come back in with strong military force to reclaim, a foothold and bring our citizens back home and the other Afghans who are trying to leave. Or Biden will simply just let this drift as he has so far. None of those options are good. All of them were avoidable had he been the right kind of leader who recognized that you got to be, as I said, a quarterback who's prepared to make adjustments. And you never pull Americans out from a position of weakness. You do it when you're in a position of strength. And the big flaw that Biden and his administration did was he pulled the military out before he got the Americans out.
I mean, just imagine if there were, I don't know how many thousands of Americans still there. Let's say we get most of them out, but we leave 1,000 behind. I mean, how do you survive that politically? 1,000 Americans who you could have gotten out, that you closed the base, you got the troops out, and then you went back to try to get them. It seems like even our allies are more than disappointed in us. They're looking at us in bewilderment saying, you're supposed to be the leader of the Western Alliance?
Well, here again, it goes to Biden's capacity to lead. And I have to say, with all due respect to President Biden, I think this reveals fully that he's incapable. My belief is, again, knowing how it works when you're in a high place in the executive branch, like a governor or president, is that he was being given conflicting information from his advisors. He was getting intelligence reports that we now know he ignored. He was getting recommendations from the military that in many ways he ignored. And he was also getting, I know this has to be the case, recommendations and advice from, are you ready for this, Dinesh? Political consultants and people who've done focus groups. And Biden chose the political route because he had locked himself into a deadline on August 31st, and he felt like there'd be too much pushback politically if he changed the deadline and made some adjustments. So therefore, he made a political choice based on expediency rather than doing the necessary hard thing that good leaders are supposed to do, largely, mostly protecting our people and our citizens. And again, recognizing that we're not fighting, a nation state that has morals. We're fighting a group of like you say, barbarians who have no morals whatsoever.
Whenever I see a calamity of this sort, I always look to see if Obama has any fingerprints on it, and sure enough, in this case, he does. In fact, this is a tweet from you. In 2014, Obama freed the terrorists Karkawa and 4 other terrorists from Gitmo in a swap for 1 deserter. Now, at that time, if you recall, Obama gave very pompous assurances. These people are going to Qatar. They will be under close supervision. They're not going to return to the battlefield. I mean, all of these turn out to be flatly false. And in fact, when the United States goes into negotiations with the Taliban, there's this guy Karkawa sitting on the Taliban side of the table, and I understand he was one of the masterminds of the one-day conquest of Kabul.
Yes, and again, they impeached Trump over a phone call to the Ukrainian president. The whole world is upside down. President Obama is responsible for a ridiculously bad decision. And whatever his motivation was to do it, the fact is he did it. And he made a deal not only to trade for that terrorist, but 4 others in exchange for a deserter, an American soldier who had deserted. That's not a good deal for the American people. And to think that he was going to let out a top terrorist like that, and they were going to trust the promise that they would, never do it again, is beyond naive. It's childishly ridiculous. And it's amazing here again that Obama gets away with things like that. But that's because of the mainstream media that is no longer objective. They are, in fact, part and parcel of the Democratic Party.
Rod, it's always fun to chat with you, and I'm sure your podcast is just absorbing. I got to check it out, and I urge people to take a look. Tell me a little bit about what life is like for you as a podcaster. Are you enjoying it? And what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Well, I never knew what these things were, podcasts. When I left home on the 15th of March 2012, the world keeps spinning around, it doesn't wait for you. And so 8 years later, when I finally get back in it, I've discovered all these things that have changed. And here's the podcast reality. And like you have one, and people of influence as you are, and other people, they all seem to have podcasts. And so I was invited to have one of my own. I've had a chance to do it now for over a year. It's been a lot of fun. And it's a chance to just get on your high horse and be a pundit. I'm now a member of the punditocracy that I used to make fun of when I was actually in the arena making the decisions. So now I'm sort of like back, judging how others are doing their jobs, like I just did with President Obama. And it's a bit of an adjustment for me because every time I do it, I kind of champ at the bit and wish I was back in the game where I could be the one making some of those decisions. But look, it's all good, as I said. I'm blessed and fortunate. It's been a long, hard road. But as an old Irish proverb said, even God can't make 2 mountains without a valley in between. And I'm climbing my way back up, and my humble little podcast is among the things I'm doing to work my way back up that mountain.
Rod, that's absolutely awesome. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dinesh. All the best to you.